client's called Jelani Etienne. Jelani, please state your name and spell it for the court reporter, please.
Jelani Etienne, Jelani and Etienne.
And Jelani, do you know Ross?
Yes.
How do you know Ross?
We work together.
Okay. At Home Depot?
At Home Depot.
Okay. And how long did y'all work together?
He started as an intern, I think 2011
Okay.
or so, in the summer.
Were you already an employee at Home Depot?
I started February 2011.
Okay. And did y'all work together at the Treehouse?
Yes.
Were you a part of the same web dev project team?
Yeah, we were in the team, so he, I think, was on a different part of the website,
Okay.
like checkout.
What? Go ahead.
I was more mammal at the time, which is my account, my list, and doing a lot more of the homepage stuff.
Okay. Where did you sit in relation to Ross?
I sit right behind him.
Did you get to know him pretty well?
Yeah, I work, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Ross's personality. Did you have sufficient opportunity to interact with Ross and learn about Ross and kind of get to know him?
Yeah, every day. So, during the day, we'll talk about, stuff that's going on during the day, sports, just any co-worker type topics.
Was Ross big into sports?
Yeah. I remember him refereeing for football, so he's from Alabama, so they really talk about his Alabama stuff. So.
And did you start working with Ross? Do you remember working with Ross before Cooper was born?
Yeah.
Do you remember before even Ross and Leanna had found out that? Did you talk to Ross about finding out when Leanna was pregnant?
I remember the day he found out. I mean, he was happy, like sitting on cloud nine, just saying that he's going to be a dad. And I was at that moment, I was already a dad, like 4 or 5 years in being a dad. So I knew how he felt. He expressed that on his face. So.
And tell the jury, how many children do you have?
I have one.
Boy or girl?
A girl.
How old is she?
She just turned 9 on the 23rd.
Was Ross a proud father?
Yeah. When Cooper was born, that's all he would talk about. I understood what he was going through. So it was the first time I did the same thing. Every moment, everything, every little thing. When I share it and talk about it. So.
Would he show you photos of Cooper?
Yeah. Especially when he was in the Little Apron daycare, they'll send pictures and videos to him. So, any time during the day, something comes through, he's like, "Oh, look what Cooper's doing," or "How you looking?" So, yeah, we get that.
Would it be over the top bragging, or just mention here and there Cooper?
I mean, he's a parent, so it's not really over the top. You always want to share about your child and what they're doing. So
You didn't. Well, Did you find it theatrical or sincere, or?
No, it was sincere. It was just,
Object to speculation, Judge, so whether it was sincere or not. He can talk about his observations, and I'm going to object to leading at this point.
You can move first.
Did it appear to you that Ross was faking it?
no.
Can you give us an idea about the sort of topics that Ross and you and other colleagues and co-workers would talk about?
Sports. That's kind of how the morning would start, because it was going through game time and stuff. We'll talk about stuff that came up in the news, our lives, just random topics.
Did you know if Ross would use the website Reddit?
Yes.
Would he share with you stories that would pop up on his Reddit page?
Vaguely, I don't really partake in Reddit much as other folks would. So, if there was a topic on there that he deemed interesting to share, yeah, we could talk about it.
Did Ross love Chick-fil-A?
Yes.
How do you know that?
So, like almost every morning, like he would bring his lunch in, and I'll come in, and jokingly, I'm like, yo, you ate potato tots before I finished. I wanted some. Why didn't you give me some?
Right.
So, we would joke about that, and then, he'll eat his sandwich, but I just like potato tots.
Was Ross a conversation bomber, fact checker type?
Yeah, like we would have conversations that like me and another coworker would have. Sometime during a conversation, if he overheard stuff that he would, felt like he might need to put his 2 cents in, he'll come in and say something, and we're just left there to pick up the conversation and go back to talking about it.
Do you remember Ross ever using cop talk or police jargon?
Yeah, he did a lot of like the code for certain things that cops would go through to describe the situation. So their code numbers.
Did you find that weird?
Not really, because he talked about it from what he used to do in Tuscaloosa, and like his brother, and his brother was, in the cops, and he was a SWAT team. So I didn't really find that weird. That's just you being around it all the time. That's what we're talking about.
You remember Ross ever referring to the break room as the 10-7 room?
Not personally, but I wouldn't pass that by him.
On the day of Cooper's passing, on June 18th, did you see Ross that day?
Yeah, saw him that day. There was nothing that stuck out. I just remember him coming in about the same time he came in. Talked about work. We about to go do meetings because we normally do stand-ups in the morning for our team. So yeah, he had to go do his meeting. I had to go do mine. It wasn't really anything off.
Jelani, would it be uncommon for folks in web dev to take on side projects and build websites?
No, we kind of all do it. That's what we do.
Would it be uncommon for y'all to use Google Chrome as your primary browser to do your web dev work?
Not at all. That's kind of the preferred browser.
And as your preferred browser, would you clear the cache and web history to test changes and defects?
Yeah. Any issue would do. we always kind of declare cash so we could come in as a first user to see how a user would do and if anything that we were fixing, if we fix something, if it changed, we would know if it changed or not. Because sometimes the cash server side or client side would kind of interrupt with that.
It's something that y'all have to do.
Yeah.
All right, Jelani, thanks. He's going to have some questions for you.
Not a whole lot, don't worry. How you doing, sir?
I'm pretty good. How you?
Pretty well. We met, oh goodness, it was back in the spring at some point, briefly over at Home Depot.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Like a year or so. Right?
Oh, I wasn't asking the time. You remember meeting with us?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And just briefly, you talked about, you said the defendant would actually show you emails and things like that with his son's photograph. I guess they'd send emails from the daycare?
Yeah.
Okay. So he would keep track of those and show them to you, pictures of his son.
Yeah, we show everybody that's in that around there.
Just a question, that last question about clearing the is it cache, clearing the cache. Would you have to do that if you're working on a computer and you're doing a project, you're up on a deadline and you're working on it? Do you have to do that pretty consistently?
Yeah, if you don't initially see your changes, then yeah, you would have to kind of clear the cache. You just kind of clear the period.
So if you're doing it for that purpose, you'd be doing it, let's say if you're working on a project June 17th, and you got to try to get it done by that day, you're going to be trying to clear your cache if that's why you're doing it, right? Like on that day or when you start it up? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If it was for that purpose, it wouldn't have been like 11 days before that.
I mean, you could have cleared it 11 days before that also.
Right. You could have, but if the purpose is trying to keep up with a project, it'd have been, if you're doing it for that purpose, you'd have done it that day you're working on it, right?
If you were working on it, yeah.
Okay. Excuse me. All right? We're good. All right. And he didn't seem stressed or anything that day. Everything seemed normal, right?
To me, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It didn't seem like he was like all tired or like he had, oh Lord, I got all this stuff going on at work. He actually kind of came in late that day, right?
I think so.
Y'all were joking about it?
Yeah.
Okay. And he had a pretty flexible schedule, right?
We,
Y'all all kind of did.
I mean, it's not said to be
Right.
on a schedule, but I mean, we kind of do.
Yeah. As long as you get your work done, everything's cool.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's called Angie Bond. Hey, good afternoon, Angie. Please introduce yourself to these folks
My name's Angie Bond,
and go ahead and spell your name if you don't mind.
ANGIEBOND.
Okay. And I want to ask you first, Angie, just so that people know who you are, kind of tell them where you're from and what it is that you do.
I live in Brandon, Mississippi, and I'm a medical technologist.
All right. Obviously, we're here in Ross's trial. So I want to ask you how it is that you would come to know Ross Harris.
Leanna Taylor and I have been best friends since high school.
And if you would tell the jury a little bit about sort of the time frame when you would have met Ross through Leanna and how that came about.
I met Ross I believe it was the summer of 2004. She came to see me and brought him. They were dating at the time, and she wanted me to be her boyfriend.
Okay. And was that in Mississippi?
Yes.
And they ended up getting married.
Yes.
And were you in the wedding?
Yes.
When was that?
In 2006.
All right. After they got married, were you still living in Mississippi?
Yes.
Where were they?
In Tuscaloosa.
And did there come a time when they moved from Tuscaloosa to Marietta?
Yes.
So during this time period, after they got married in 2006, did you continue to be Leanna's best friend?
Yes.
And did you have opportunity over those years to be around Ross and Leanna together in various places?
Yes.
And did you continue to communicate with Leanna by phone or text or stay in touch the way friends do?
Yes.
Right. I want to jump all the way ahead to when Leanna got pregnant. Tell the folks what you know, if anything, about her ability to get pregnancy and that sort of time period in their relationship.
She really wanted to have a baby. It took her longer than she wanted to. She got really anxious about it. She just really wanted to have a baby.
And do you have any knowledge of if Ross wanted a child as well?
Yes.
Okay, he did.
Yes.
Right. Is it a fair statement to say that they were an excited, expecting couple?
Yes.
You're still living in Mississippi, and they're living in Tuscaloosa.
Yes.
Okay. Let's jump ahead then to when Cooper's born. This would have been August of 2012, correct?
Yes.
What I want to talk to you about is whether over the next 20-something months, if you continue to have an opportunity to be around Ross and Leanna, so you could observe what kind of parent, what kind of father that Ross was, and sort of the nature of the relationship between Ross and Cooper.
I went and visited them in Marietta, and they also came to visit me in Mississippi. We were from the same hometown, Leanna and I, so some weekends, holidays, I would see them in Demopolis.
Okay. So Ross and Leanna would actually drive out to Mississippi. Would they stay with you?
Yes, they did.
And you met with me a couple of days ago, and we looked at some pictures. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember seeing a picture of Ross and Cooper in a park?
Yes.
Right. Now we've shown some pictures to the jury. Was one of those a picture of them in Mississippi visiting you?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so you told us you also went to Marietta.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It's usually a weekend. I believe it was a Thursday through Sunday night or Monday morning. Just went for the weekend to see them. We went to the Georgia Aquarium. It was really crowded that day, so we didn't have the best time. We went to the varsity, and this was Leanna and Ross and Cooper as well. Leanna and I did want to spend a little bit of time together since we're best friends. We don't get to see each other very often, so Ross, we were going to go to a movie while Cooper was at daycare, and we got the movie time wrong, so Leanna ended up having to call Ross and say, hey, can you pick up Cooper? And I'm sorry, we got the movie time wrong. And he was very willing to do that so that we could spend some time together.
And during the time you spent with them in Marietta, did you have a chance to kind of see Ross and Cooper together there in the home, and how they were as father and son?
He played with him all the time. He did the not-so-fun parenting things like changing diapers and bathing, and he enjoyed those things. He got on the floor and played with him. He always did funny things to make him laugh.
We saw a picture of the circus. Do you remember, by any chance, do you remember the circus?
Yes, that's when they came to visit me in Mississippi.
All right, so that was in Mississippi.
Yes.
Did you have a chance to see how Ross was around Cooper in an outing like the circus?
Yes. Before that, that's when we went to the park.
Okay.
And then Ross pushed him on swing, got on the playground and played with him. And then we went to the circus that night. And, I believe Cooper sat in Ross's lap for the circus.
Did you, were you around Ross and Cooper enough to observe them, be able to form an opinion as to whether or not Ross loved his little boy?
Yes, he loves that little boy very much.
Are you, outside of your relationship with Leanne, were you friends with Ross?
No, not outside my friendship with Liam.
Okay. Are you friends with him now?
No.
What do you think about him?
I don't really like him very much because he cheated on his best friend.
I need to object to that. I don't think that's relevant, what she thinks about him.
Kristen.
Okay. Going to move into some other things about Ross. Just generally, you've known him for almost a decade, I guess, at this point. And you and I have spoken on a couple of occasions about Ross. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And have I asked you to kind of tell me a little bit about what you observed in his personality, what kind of guy he was, I guess?
Yes.
Can you share with the jury sort of his personality traits that were unique that you observed?
When I first met Ross, when Leanna brought him to meet me, the first thing out of his mouth was, "I'm crazy about her and I'm going to marry her." And I remember thinking, yeah, we'll see about that. He, everything I said, he knew more about it. He had a bigger, better story. I kind of thought he was obnoxious. But as I got to know him, I realized that's just who he is. He's not trying to make me look bad or anything. It's just, he knows a lot of stuff. Over the years, spending time with him, he was always on his phone, always, whenever we'd go out to eat with him and Leanna. If he would hear a conversation, people he didn't even know, he would pull out his phone to see what they were talking about, and then he would tell us what they were talking about. He was very friendly. He would always speak to people when we were at the grocery store, in line, talk to the cashier. He was just very, very friendly, very chatty. He had a bad habit of saying things at the wrong time.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, the first time I talked with him after he was arrested, I got on the phone with him and
Judge,
he
I'm going to
said,
object to hearsay, self-serving statement, understand.
Kristen.
I'm going to ask to come back and make a proffer on that, okay, Judge? When Cooper died in June of 2014, where were you at the time?
I was in Florida at the beach with a friend.
Okay. And how were you contacted and made aware?
I got a text message from Leanna that said, "Please pray, something bad has happened and no one will tell me what." I didn't have my phone at the time, so when I called her back, she said, "I need you to sit down." And she said, "Cooper's gone." And I said, "What do you mean he's gone?" She said, "Ross accidentally left him in the car." And she said, "I don't know how we're going to get through this because Ross is never going to forgive himself."
All right. So, did you travel up here to Marietta to be with your friend?
I did.
Okay. What kind of shape was she in?
most of the time she was in a daze. But when we were at home, just family, she was an absolute wreck. She was apart. She said over and over again, this can't be real, this can't be real. I just want to wake up and see my little boy. She was inconsolable.
We've heard a little bit about something that happened later in June. Did you actually come back out to Marietta to be with Leanna a few weeks later?
I did.
Do you remember what time frame that was?
Cooper's funeral was, I believe, on Saturday, and I came back to Marietta that Monday.
And was Leanna okay?
No. I was at the probable cause hearing with her, and as soon as we left the courtroom, we got in the elevator, and she just fell apart. She is very much so a private person. She doesn't like to be the center of attention. She likes to, her default mode is to take care of everyone else. And when she's by herself or with close family and friends, that's when she actually falls apart, allows herself to feel. And she did a lot of that those 2 weeks when I was with her.
All right. And you weren't in the courtroom during the time of her testimony this week, have you been?
No.
You weren't in the courtroom yesterday?
No.
You don't have any idea what she said or how she acted in here, do you?
No.
But you know how she acted when she walked out the door, don't you?
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
She fell apart.
Relevance?
We've been talking about the emotions and the reactions of these people, particularly Leanna Harris, who has been identified as a suspect by Detective Stoddard. They've indicated that her behavior is suspicious.
Judge, I object to the speaking objection when you take something up. I said we approach.
I'm allowed over objection. Speaking objections are appropriate. Carry disregard.
These people need to know what you saw yesterday. Can you please tell them?
As soon as she walked in the room where we were sitting, she absolutely fell apart. She was inconsolable, sobbing. I held her. She was rocking back and forth. We had to sit in there for about 30 minutes before we could even leave because we could not get her to stop crying. We could not get her to calm down.
Is that the same kind of emotion that you've seen from her over the last 2+ years?
Yes. She doesn't show it very often, and when she does, it's really hard. Really, really hard to watch.
That's all I need. Thank you.
My name is Jesse Evans. I'm one of the two prosecutors that called you several weeks ago. We spoke on the phone very briefly. I think you said you were at a baseball game. Is that correct? Or going to a baseball
game? Yes, I have a lot of family in my house.
Okay. And we at that time had scheduled a time to follow up and discuss the case because you had that engagement at the baseball field that you needed to get to. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you some background questions. I want to follow up back on that in just a second. So if I understand your testimony correctly, you've known the defendant in total about 12 years. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, so 2004, I'm terrible with math, but now 2016, I think I got that right. That's when I messed it up earlier in the trial. That would be 12 years, correct?
Yes.
And you, of the two of them, obviously you've known Leanna much better because you met her in high school.
Yes.
Okay. And when you say you were in her wedding, I assume is that as a bridesmaid?
Yes.
Okay. Were you the maid of honor?
No,
Okay.
her sister was.
Okay, her sister was. And you had talked a little bit about the background between them. There was a point in time where Leanna actually told you that the defendant said he was not ready for a baby early on in the relationship. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but it's possible.
Okay. You had talked a little bit with defense counsel about visiting. How often during this period of time were they coming to visit you? We'll do vice versa. First coming to visit you, and then you coming to Georgia to visit with them. How often are we talking about?
They came to see me once, and I went to see them once after Cooper was born.
Okay, so we're talking about a total of 2 visits.
Yes,
Okay.
plus weekends and holidays.
All right, give me the weekends and holidays. How often are we talking about there?
Honestly, can't give you a Christmas and Thanksgiving,
Okay.
and then maybe 3 other weekends.
Okay.
I'm not really sure.
So the 2 times that you identified, we'll call them the more extended visits, the one where they came to see you, and then when you came over here to see them, was that a weekend visit, or was that longer than that?
Usually Thursday through Sunday night, Monday morning.
Okay. So for all of these visits, essentially what we're talking about is a weekend plus maybe an extra date or something like that. And that's the opportunity that you had to observe them in their home setting. Is that correct?
Yes.
These weekend visits with them. Correct?
Yes.
When's the last time you saw them together?
It was in March of 2014
Where?
at my house in Mississippi.
For a long weekend?
Yes.
All right. Now, I'll ask you a little bit about what you've talked about in terms of your description of the defendant's personality. You would agree that your description that you gave is based on your personal observations, correct?
Yes.
That in addition to what happened to have been revealed to you by the defendant, correct?
Yes.
I mean, as humans, when we make our assessments of somebody's personality, it has to be based on the combination of those 2 things. Would you agree?
So you're asking me things that I witnessed and things that he told me himself?
Things that you witnessed and things that he happened to have revealed to you, that's the basis for your description of his
That
personality
he
as you
revealed
saw
to
it.
me through me seeing him, yes.
Okay. What was your phone number back then? Is it the same phone number that you have now?
I believe so.
Okay. I don't want to put it like on national TV or anything. If I brought you a Post-it note, could you write it down for us so that both sides could look at it? You think it's the same now?
I believe so.
All right. I'm trying to do this to kind of respect your privacy. I think it's the same number that I called you on, but I just want to make sure. Right. Okay. Mr. Kilgore, I think that's the one you provided to us. All right, so when you talked about June the 18th of 2014, you believe that's the same phone number that you would have had back then?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the phone number that you received the text and the phone call from Leanna?
Yes.
Is that right? Right. You had talked a little bit on direct about how Leanna doesn't like to be the center of attention. It's a little bit different description when it talked about the defendant, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
He was a little more gregarious and sort of enjoyed having the attention that kind of surrounded his big personality. Would you agree with that?
He's very outgoing and friendly.
All right. And then the moment that you described from yesterday where Leanna came out and kind of had this breakdown that you described, you weren't in the courtroom to know precisely what preceded that, correct?
No.
Or whether she was being asked to look at, 70 photos of Cooper or anything like that, just prior to that?
No.
Okay. Have you been watching the case online? Have you been keeping up with it?
No.
Fine.
It's hard not to because everybody talks about it, but no.
Sure. All
I
right.
try to stay away from it as much as possible.
You've already, you came from Mississippi, correct?
Yes.
Okay. When did you arrive here?
Saturday.
All right. And Leanna, sounds like you're not just a friend of Leanna's, you're a good friend, like the best you could probably have, correct?
Yes.
Was it fair to say that you would stick with her through thick and thin?
Yes.
Okay. And do anything for her? I want to ask you about your contact with her since this happened. How often are you in contact with her, would you say? Is it a daily thing? Is it a weekly thing?
Right after the accident, it was every day.
Okay.
Every day.
And then I want to ask you about your contact with the defendant. Since this happened, what contact have you had with him?
Only when I was with Leanna and they were talking on the phone. I did go with her to a visit. I know once, maybe twice.
Okay, so you visited him at least a couple of times.
Yes.
and you've had the opportunity to at least speak to him or hear his voice, as he would call her. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And fair to say, Leanna, initially stayed kind of in a support role for him. It wasn't up until recently, as we heard, that she divorced him. Is that correct?
Yeah, she supports that it was an accident.
Okay. Now I want to ask you about the defense. You already talked about a couple occasions that you talked to Mr. Kilgore in the defense. How many times in total, either in person or on the phone, have you talked to the defense over the years?
Several.
When you say several, 10?
7,
Okay.
8 maybe.
How about just since you've been down here, how many opportunities have you had to meet with Mr. Kilgore prior to your testimony today?
We met with them on Sunday.
Okay, met Sunday, and of course, you would have talked to them today too when you arrived, correct?
Yes, yes.
So at least 2 occasions just since you've been here. Are you including those in the 7 that you spoke with them?
Yeah.
So 7 plus those, we're up to maybe 9 or 10 times in total that you've talked to them through the years. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we were provided summaries of some of the interviews in this case. Were you interviewed by an investigator?
No.
Okay. You weren't interviewed by the defense's investigator, TJ, or anyone like that?
No.
Okay. Do you know if it was recorded? We've been given copies of stuff. I don't have a copy of any statement that you gave to them, is why I'm asking.
No, nothing was reported
Okay.
to my knowledge.
Now, I'm not trying to be overly critical when I ask you this point, but I need to get back to what we've talked about. When Mr. Boring and I called you, we had scheduled a time that we were going to talk to each other by phone. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And you were very polite in your response message, but you essentially called us back and said, well, listen, I'm not going to talk to you, and you asked that we respect that. Is that fair?
Yes, I said that I would call you back, so I wanted to do that and just let you know.
And I appreciate that. And you don't have any obligation to talk to us, but fair to say you don't have a problem talking with the defense. You've done so at least 10 times. But when it comes to talking to the state, that's not something you were willing to do prior to coming in here today.
Not at the time, no.
All right. Well, I want to talk a little bit about what Leanna has shared in terms of her relationship with the defendant. She has, at least on occasion, we know, in writing and also verbally shared that there were problems between the two of them, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, I had the benefit, we've actually got 2 recordings of you. One is the voicemail you left on my phone saying that you prefer not to talk. And then we had the Good Morning America interview. Do you remember going on Good Morning America?
Yes.
Okay. And that was September 22nd of 2014. Do you remember that?
That sounds right.
Okay. This would be after the probable cause hearing, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, I've had the benefit of looking back at that, and I want to ask you some questions about some of the things you shared publicly to Good Morning America and the nation. First of all, you said that they had a rocky marriage. Is that correct?
Yes.
You also mentioned that I think Leanna had discovered some things or knew some things. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
Okay.
She knew that he had been looking at porn, and she knew that he had been messaging with him.
Okay. So at least in September of 2014, you knew that much about the relationship from what she had revealed to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And would you agree that Leanna Taylor, formerly Harris, now Taylor, probably was in the best position to know what sort of person the defendant was because she was with him on a daily basis?
Yes.
Okay. But even so, we know now that there was an even kind of darker dimension to him that wasn't revealed to you by
I'm going to
Leanna,
get to the
correct?
characterization, the phrase that is used.
I'm sorry, repeat the question, please.
Even understanding that, we now know that there's even kind of a darker dimension or a deeper side to the defendant that wasn't revealed to you through Leanna, correct? That she didn't fully realize until much later.
I knew that he had issues.
Okay.
I knew that he was looking at pornography and messaging other women. I knew he had those tendencies.
Did you know that by the time of the September 22nd interview in Good Morning America?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you this. I haven't been able to speak to you to find out these questions, so I'm having to do it now. My question is, was it your decision to go on Good Morning America and discuss these things, or was this something that somebody asked you to do, such as the defense?
The defense did not ask me to do this. I was given the opportunity to speak the truth, and I knew I needed to take it.
Okay. So that was a decision that you made.
Yes.
I can only assume that you discussed that with somebody before you did it. You didn't do it on your own.
Lawrence Zimmerman
Okay.
mentioned it to me.
So Leanna's attorney, you discussed that with Leanna's attorney, Lawrence Zimmerman, before you went on Good Morning America and made a national statement. Is that correct?
He kind of helped set it up because that's not something that I would do.
Okay,
I
all right.
wouldn't do.
So I understand now. So Leanna had an attorney from back then, and he set up an interview for you to go on Good Morning America to talk about the history of their relationship.
He said he thought I would be the best person to speak the truth about Leanna and Ross.
Okay. Since that time, obviously, a lot has changed in terms of the status with Leanna and the defendant. She's now divorced him, correct?
Yes.
And there's been an awful lot that's come forward since that time through the investigation. Would you agree with that as well?
Yes.
All right. So whatever we're talking about here in terms of the relationship and your observations, would you agree that you've not seen the state's case file? You haven't had a chance to look at our evidence fully? And of course, because we haven't been able to talk about it, we haven't been able to have a dialogue about any of those things. Would you agree?
That's correct.
Okay. And you did not see, for instance, the hot car video that the defendant looked at 5 days before leaving Cooper strapped in the back of the car. You didn't have an opportunity to see that by chance, did you?
No, I didn't see that video.
And fair to say, on June the 18th of 2014, you weren't in Mississippi, but you weren't even in the state of Georgia when Cooper was killed.
No.
You weren't present, weren't at the Chick-fil-A. I don't know the specifics of what may have immediately preceded that, correct?
I do not know.
Okay. And I assume, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have a Whisper account, and you didn't have one back in 2014, correct?
No.
Okay. You weren't communicating with the defendant in any way on Whisper or involved in any of that stuff that may have been going on with him back then?
No.
Okay. Just a minute, Ms. Bond. Oh, yeah. Was Leanna present with you when you spoke to Mr. Zimmerman?
She was not with me at the time when I spoke to him.
Okay. Did you do that on the phone, or did you do that in person?
I was in Marietta with her, but she was not actually present during the conversation.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Do you know where she was?
Yes.
Okay. Where was she?
She was in a different meeting. She had an appointment that she was.
Was she meeting with the defense attorneys?
No.
Okay. Describe the full circumstances then. I mean, how did you even know to go speak to her attorney about that?
I didn't go speak to him. He was meeting with her, and then she had an appointment, and I was waiting on her. And before he left, we were just kind of talking, and I told him how angry I was at the allegations and the lies that were being said about my best friend.
Okay.
And I was very, very angry, and I wish that someone would tell the truth. And that's when he mentioned to me, well, Good Morning America has been contacting me, but I think you would be the best person to speak out for her because you know the truth.
Okay. And thereafter he set that up for you?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you agree, we talked about this a little bit, but would you agree that if Leanna had not been told the full truth back in September of 2014 when you did your interview, there's no way she could have shared with you the full information that may have been out there about what was really going on?
Calls for speculation.
I think it's a fair question for Cross.
Cross-examination.
The truth that I wanted to tell was how much she loves her little boy and how much Ross loved that little boy. That what was being said was that she did love her little boy. And that some people were insinuating she had something to do with it. And that's just not true.
But you would agree that you could only reveal on that interview what you knew from her and what you observed. If you didn't know anything else, then you couldn't have shared it, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
The Good Morning America, when was that? Remember?
It was after the probable cause hearing. I honestly can't remember the date. He mentioned it, but I don't remember that date.
Do you know if you had even met me by the time you went on Good Morning America?
No.
How much longer after Good Morning America did you even meet him?
At least several months, maybe more, I would say.
Okay. And we never even talked on the phone before, had we? How much do you get paid for Good Morning America?
They offered me $1,000, but I didn't take it because I was there to tell the truth, not make money.
Well, you've indicated to us that what you went on there to say was you wanted to tell the truth after you sat through the probable cause hearing. And the truth that you wanted to tell, and you did tell on Good Morning America, was that Leanna loved her little boy and Ross loved his little boy.
Just to leave.
Yes.
Suspended is deleted.
Could you restate what you just told Mr. Evans just a moment ago about the two specific things that you wanted to tell on Good Morning America, please?
How much Leanna loves her little boy and how much Ross loves her little boy. Their little boy.
Whatever you may have learned between now and then, does it change those two facts?
No.
No. Oh. Why is it you didn't want to talk to the state when they called to set up a meeting with you?
Since I couldn't talk to them at the time, I had 24 hours to really think about it, and I thought about the past 2 years. And I just decided I didn't want to talk to him because I just didn't trust him.
Thank you. Who's Michael? All right. Defense calls Michael Bagents. Hey, Michael, you doing okay? All right. I want you to tell these folks who you are and what your relationship is to Ross.
My name's Michael Bagents. Ross is my brother.
Okay. Tell these people what it is that you do for a living and where you live.
I'm a police officer with the City of Tuscaloosa.
And specifically, what do you do as a police officer?
I'm a sergeant assigned to the training division.
Okay. Have you ever testified in court before?
I have
Is it something you do on a regular basis?
used to, not anymore.
Okay. Are you a little nervous?
I'm very nervous.
Okay. If you would, do me a favor, just plant your feet and don't spin next to me.
That's all right.
That's all right. I'm just going to get right into it. I want you to tell us about how often you would get to see and visit with your brother and Leanna after Cooper was born.
I think we probably had approximately 10 to 12 times maybe over the course of after they moved to Atlanta.
Let's kind of go through those. Tuscaloosa is roughly 3 hours or so from Marietta, is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay. Would you come to Marietta to visit with them?
We did.
Right. And would just you, your wife is Amy,
Correct.
would just the two of you come, or would y'all bring all your kids?
We did both. Sometimes we'd bring the children. Sometimes it'd just be me and Amy.
All right. I want to go into some specifics about some of these visits. Do you have any idea how many times y'all would have come to Tuscaloosa to visit Ross and Cooper and Leanna in Marietta?
About 6 times.
Where would you stay when you came?
We stayed with him.
Right. It's a condo, right?
Yes.
It wasn't a big 4 or 5 bedroom house.
Okay.
Were y'all sleeping on sofas or blow ups or what?
When we would come and stay, we would stay in Cooper's room. There was a bed in there, and Cooper would stay in the master bedroom with Ross and Leanna. And then the kids, when they would come, they would sleep on blow-up mattresses and the couch in the living room.
All right. And over these 6 or so visits that y'all made to Marietta, what kind of things would y'all do?
We took in a Braves game. We went to dinner. Took the kids to different things like the Lego land or something. Just family stuff. We went to Piedmont Park. Just stuff like that.
All right. Well, and we've heard a little bit about Piedmont Park. Did you go there on multiple occasions?
I think we went there twice.
All right. And when you do outings such as Piedmont Park, would the kids go? Would Cooper go as well?
He did. One instance, it was just all of us in Cooper. Our kids didn't come that time. And the other instance was the whole family.
When you stay in somebody's home, as opposed to everybody getting motel rooms and just meeting up, you're actually embedded in the family. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You're there when people have breakfast.
Yes.
When you watch the news at the end of the day and get ready to turn in, you basically are with them all the time.
That's correct.
During those 6 or so visits to Marietta, living in the home with Ross and Cooper and Leanne, did you have a chance to see the nature of the relationship between Ross and Cooper and form any opinion about how he felt about his little boy?
I did.
Tell us about that.
I think he loved Cooper more than life itself. I'll never believe anything else other than he loved his son more than anything.
Was he kind to him?
Yes.
Did you play with him?
Yes.
Did he mind pitching in for the little things?
He was very attentive. He did. That was his little buddy. He did everything. Something needed to be done, he did it.
Did he ever bring Cooper to see you in Tuscaloosa?
Yes.
Just so these folks will know. Are your parents still in life? Do they still live in that area?
They do.
Okay. So you and Amy and the kids are there. Y'all's folks are there. Did you have other family or friends in the Tuscaloosa area?
Well, Ross's mother-in-law, Deborah, lived in Tuscaloosa, or the North Pole area, which is about the
It's
same.
like a suburb of Tuscaloosa.
Right.
Okay. So what I want them to understand is, were there a lot of occasions for them to make that 3-hour drive to come visit in Tuscaloosa?
Yes.
When they would come, who would they stay with?
I think, well, they stayed with us sometimes. They stayed with Deborah. They stayed with Mom and Dad. They didn't just stay with us. They stayed with Deborah sometimes. They stayed with us sometimes. They stayed with Mom and Dad sometimes.
What kind of things would y'all do, or would you have a chance to observe Ross doing with Cooper when they would come to Tuscaloosa for these visits?
We'd play with him, put him to bed, feed him. Everything that a normal parent does, he'd do it.
You said you got 4 kids,
I do.
and so you know a little bit about raising kids.
Just a little bit.
you see anything unusual or remarkable that would have led you to believe that he didn't absolutely love Cooper?
Never.
I want to talk to you about the beach trip in end of 2000, excuse me, the end of May 2014. Tell us about how that beach trip came about.
Well, a few times a year we go to Fort Walton, family beach trip type thing. And Ross and Leanne and Cooper came on this one. We all stayed together in the house.
Whose house is it?
It's actually my mother-in-law's house.
Okay.
But we do it as a family thing each year. A lot of us get together, parents, in-laws, everybody, and have a family beach trip.
And did you get a chance? Of course, we now know that this was less than 3 weeks before Cooper died. So, did you have a chance to see how Ross was in those final weeks before Cooper's death? How he was with his little boy?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I remember one thing in particular on the beach. We had this, we've never set a tent up on the beach before, but Ross brought a tent to set up, and he had one of those little bitty kiddie pools, and he went and got ocean water, put it in that pool, and he put the tent up over the pool so Cooper wouldn't get burned up. And that's where he played, and Ross was right there the whole time.
Did they seem to enjoy each other's company?
Yes.
Cooper had a good time at the beach?
Yes, he did.
We've heard a lot about your brother now. We've been in trial for a couple of weeks, and so I'm not sure you can tell us too much that's going to be new. But obviously, you've known your brother his whole life.
Correct.
So you're probably in a pretty good position to tell us a little bit about his quirks or personality traits that might be unique or different. Tell us a little bit. Tell us what comes to mind.
Well, he's just a talker. I mean, he's never met a stranger. It was really annoying going out, and I've always been kind of quiet. I don't talk to a lot of people when we're out. If I don't know you, I'm not going to speak. It's nothing personal. But Ross would talk to anybody and everybody. It was annoying. He worked at for a time he worked at the police department and as a dispatcher. And there were times where we use 10 codes to talk on the radio and stuff, like police do. But I don't do it when I'm off duty. When I'm off, I'm off. I don't talk to other people using 10 codes. And Ross would do that. It was annoying.
Did he use legal jargons and cop talks?
He did a lot. He even did it after he left the police department. I remember one time when he was at Home Depot, he was showing us, where he worked and showing us the building. And he's like, "This is where we do 10-7." Nobody does that. This is the break room. Who does that? And it was just kind of like, I remember one time we were at my parents' house, and a friend of ours that we grew up with had stopped by to see my parents. And we had a juvenile was breaking into a car out in front of the house. And I was standing around back, and Ross yells out, "There's 1062. Well, nobody does that. I don't do that. Hey, there's a guy breaking into the car. That's what you do. And anyway, he just, I don't know why he did that. I don't know why. It was kind of quirky. I don't know, but it was annoying. Anyway.
He did.
Very.
heard a little bit during this trial about there was some planning for a cruise. And your name and Amy's name has come up for that topic. I want you to set the record straight with these folks and tell them about the whole planning of the cruise, please.
It first came up when we were near the Fort Walton beach trip. When we were on the beach, we were talking about it. A family cruise, all our kids, my other nephew, my other sister-in-law, and Ross was like, let's do it. You know, we even talked about our parents going also. And we talked about it probably for the next few days, even the next week or so. And he was really on me about it. And I finally, told him, well, look into it. We talked about, I wasn't sure if we needed passports, things like that. I ended up getting passports for my kids. But
Let me stop you right there. Are you telling us you actually got passports for your kids based on the discussion of the planning of the cruise that started there in Fort Walton?
that's correct.
So this was a serious plan. Y'all were planning a cruise.
Yes.
And Ross was the one who was supposed to be doing the
Judge,
planning.
I'm object at this point to leaving.
Who was the one that was supposed to be doing the planning and looking into it?
Ross was spearheading it.
And was it your understanding that this cruise was going to be for the family, including all the kids?
That's correct.
Including Cooper?
That's correct.
Did you have some group texts with Ross and your wife and Leanna about this?
I know that Ross texted about it. I don't remember. I'm not a big texter. I don't remember. I remember having phone conversations with him. I don't remember specific text off the top of my head.
You and Ross talked on the phone about cruise.
We did.
Is that where you would have notified him that you had gotten gone ahead and gotten passports for your kids?
It would have been.
And whatever efforts, if any, Ross made in the days after there to start looking into a cruise or Googling cruise lines or contacting an agent, do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't recall. I know I told him that we were looking into Carnival. Let's do Carnival because it was more family oriented. There's a boat with a bunch of slides on it. We thought the kids would like that type of thing.
In the times that you visited Ross and Marietta, did you ever become aware if he was looking for in the market for a house?
Yes.
What, if anything, do you remember about that?
He specifically, I believe he said something along the lines of their lease was coming up, or it was, they were starting to think about the future for like Cooper's schooling. He talked about, wanting a house with a big backyard, good school zone. Everything revolved around Cooper. There was one time we went riding around on one of the visits. He drove us around in areas that they were looking at, and I remember thinking, well, that's great, but let's go where we're going, type thing. He was with everything revolved around Cooper. He was focused on houses that would had good school zones. Period.
I had an opportunity to, and you and I have met before.
That's great.
Probably at least 2 times, maybe 2 or 3 times before.
Before.
Before today.
Yeah, probably 2 or 3 times.
But you've been to my office,
I have.
and I've actually met you in Tuscaloosa.
That's correct.
Okay. But we had a chance to meet again a night or two ago.
Yes.
All right. And ask you about something then that I want to bring up. Do you remember if Ross ever asked you to well, let me put it this way. Did Ross ever assist you in any way with internet-related matters at the Tuscaloosa Police Academy?
He did.
All right. Tell us about that.
I teach recruits, and I needed some video tools for a lesson guide. So I asked Ross I'd send him an email or I'd talk to him on the phone about a specific video that I needed pulled off the computer so I could embed it into a lesson guide, because at the time I had no clue how to do any of that. And we talked back and forth through email or through phone to get him to pull video for me.
And did he help you with those kinds of things?
He did.
And by any chance, do you remember kind of what the nature of some of those videos or video clips were?
All of them had to probably do with officer survival, like police officers being shot, involved in shootings, things of that nature, vehicle pursuits.
And did he get those together and send them to you or link them to you?
He did.
Upload them, whatever, as you asked him to do?
That's correct. He did.
You love your brother, don't you?
I do.
You're not going to lie for him, are you?
I am not.
You've been made aware of a lot of things that he's done.
I have been.
Are you ashamed of him?
I'm very ashamed of the things that he has done.
Okay, I think that's all I have at this time.
Good afternoon, sir. So, how long have you been in law enforcement? Is it 20-something years?
Approximately 20 years.
Okay, and that's all you've been in Tuscaloosa?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you said the defendant would send these videos, these are like YouTube clips to put into a PowerPoint or something like that to include in presentations you may do to younger officers and things like that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What type of trainings do you do for officers?
I
It's
teach.
been kind of something all over the place over the years, different topics.
It is. I teach a bunch of different topics.
Okay. And have you ever done child crimes or homicide or anything like that?
I have not.
Okay. But you've been in law enforcement most of your professional career, I would assume. You look like, if you've been in law enforcement 20-some odd years, it's probably been your entire professional career, correct?
It is.
Okay. All right. You were talking about looking for houses and riding around with him. When was that visit?
I do not recall the date, but it was a visit where it would have been just Amy and I believe. I don't believe the children, our kids were with us.
Okay. Would that have been sometime before the Memorial Day vacation to the beach?
Oh, yes.
Okay, it was well before that.
Yes.
And were you aware that the defendant, that your brother basically had decided they were not going to be buying a house anytime soon, as into June of 2014?
I was not aware.
Now, we talked about, I say we, I wasn't really talking, but y'all were talking about the vacation and how after y'all talked about it, you were very serious. And to show, one thing illustrating how serious you were, you went out and got a passport for your child, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were the defendant had never done that?
I was not aware.
Okay. So being serious about it, you actually did that, correct?
That's correct.
Now, I know you said he was the defendant was spearheading the vacation, the cruise plans, correct?
Yes.
Okay. that phone conversation, was that, and I've seen the text, kind of the group text back and forth. It looks like you maybe sometimes your phone doesn't respond to iMessage like others, right?
It does. I'm just not a big texter.
All right. So sometimes your text may go out completely separately from the group, and you may text him separately and things of that nature.
Or not at all.
Okay.
So I'm just not a big texter.
Yes, sir. And so when y'all had talked, there was a group text back in June 9th, and you remember the defendant, as much as you may remember texting him saying, he wanted to make this happen.
Yes, I do remember that.
Did you know that your wife actually followed up on June 17th and texted him, hey, did you ever follow up on this?
I was not aware.
Okay. Did you know that he told her he did?
I was not aware.
Were you aware that that wasn't true at the time?
I wasn't aware that they texted at all.
Okay. All right. So you're not aware that the defendant had not done anything up to that point?
I was not aware of that, no.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let's see. All right. I know that you talked about you were around the defendant and his son a lot. So you were around the defendant and Leanna a lot too, correct?
Yes.
And he appeared to be a loving husband. He treated her well, things like that. Would you agree with that?
I would.
And that's kind of what you took. This is your brother, and you're seeing him interact, and you see this as a relationship of love.
I did believe that, yes.
You would agree that since this has happened, you realize that there was another side to your brother. Would you agree with that?
I don't know that I would agree there was a different side to him. I just think I would agree that he made a lot of mistakes.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Has the defense attorney talked to you about me going to be asking you these questions about his other side of your brother?
Yes.
Okay. And y'all talked about, kind of how you're going to be prepared to answer it and things like that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything about what you knew about your brother that would have led you to expect he would be going to see prostitutes when Leanna was asking him to come home and spend time with her and Cooper?
Absolutely not.
So that is a different side than you would have expected, correct?
It was shocking to me.
Okay. And you thought you knew him?
Well, I did know him. I just don't think that anybody would share that with their brother, so to speak.
Well, nothing about what you saw from him would lead you to believe he would do something like that, right?
No, I would not have thought that.
Okay. And you talked about the him running around on the beach and stuff like that with his son. And you see him there were pictures being taken and stuff like that. Did you realize he was actually sending pictures to underage girls of those scenes at the beach?
I had no knowledge of anything like that.
That again was something different than you saw from your brother in all the years that you knew him.
Yeah, I would not have thought that.
You would agree, being in law enforcement, as a law enforcement officer, a lot of times in your job, you come across people who portray themselves in one light, or somebody you think is a great person, yet they still commit horrible acts. You would agree with that?
Sometimes, yes.
You'd agree sometimes even people who may love or appear to love somebody, they may still commit a crime and may still actually kill them, even though they purport to or actually do love them.
That's possible, yes.
And I know you haven't investigated child crimes or anything like that, but you would agree that sometimes, as far as just in general law enforcement, it may be the last person you expect who is somebody who violates a child or commits a crime.
That's true.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Were you aware that in the early morning hours received an email from your wife that on June the 17th, the day before Cooper died, Ross sent a lengthy email to a travel agent asking her to put together some information for this cruise that y'all have been talking about.
I was not.
Nothing further, Judge.
We're going to call Amy Vinings. Hey, Amy. Tell these folks who you are.
Amy Vinings.
All right. And that was your husband that just left, Michael.
Yes.
Okay. And what is your relationship to Ross?
I am his sister-in-law.
I want to go over a few things, a lot of which we heard from your husband, but I want to talk about in particular times after Cooper was born that y'all would have had a chance to visit with Leanna and Ross and Cooper. So if you could give us an idea about whether or not you would have had a chance to come to Marietta to visit with them, or they would have had a chance to come to Tuscaloosa to visit with y'all.
Yes, both. You mean after they moved to Marietta?
Right.
Both. We visited very often. We went to their home and stayed with them numerous times, at least probably 5 or 6 times. And they also came home to Tuscaloosa to visit. They stayed at our house probably 2 or 3 times. Them as well as Cooper, and just back and forth numerous times to visit.
Right. What about holidays?
Thanksgiving, Christmas, during those times they came home to visit.
You didn't live in the same town, but if we understand correctly, and from what your husband told us, y'all spent a lot of time together.
We did.
Did you, in fact, have a lot of opportunity to see kind of the nature of the relationship between Ross and Cooper?
Yes.
Tell the jury about that.
Ross was a very loving dad. He loved Cooper, bragged on Cooper, just attentive, played with him a lot, just a very good dad in my opinion.
What about outside the house when y'all would like go to Piedmont Park or go on an outing? Did you have a chance to kind of see how they interacted with each other?
Yes, when we visited, Cooper was always with us. We went to the park, took Cooper in the stroller. He was always, strolling him, carrying him around, would get ice cream and just very attentive and loving.
Sometimes doing the big things, like getting ice cream, those are the fun things. Those aren't hard. What about the small things, the changing the bath, the bedtime, feeding, and the more administrative duties of parenting? Did you have a chance to see Ross, if he would help out with those matters as well?
Yeah, he always helped out with,
bedtime, bath time, bedtime, feeding. Leanna and Ross were both very hands-on parents and seemed to, both take on those responsibilities together. And Ross was a very hands-on dad. They shared in taking care of him, shared in, all of those things together, always, as far as I witnessed.
And would you actually bring your kids out to visit in Marietta as well?
Yes, we brought our kids on a couple of different occasions. We have 4, so the accommodations in a 2-bedroom are a little tight, but we did bring them a couple of different occasions.
We've heard a little bit about Ross's personality traits, and if you could, just real quickly kind of go over some of the quirks or unique things about Ross's personality that you've noticed over the years.
Ross is a talker. He likes to, he has a lot of knowledge. He has a lot of facts. You don't want to play Ross in Trivial Pursuit. He knows a lot of things. He's going to insert himself in conversations. He's a talker. He likes to talk. Likes to look things up. Likes to know the answer. If you have a question about anything, if he doesn't know the answer, he's going to find the answer right then. Sometimes over the top. Sometimes, just he's going to find the answer.
Can you get on your nerves?
Not all the time. Sometimes. Not all the time.
Okay. What about in public? Have you ever had a chance to see him interact with other people in public, either at church or restaurants or whatnot?
Absolutely. Never meets a stranger. If you walk into a room, 9 times out of 10, he's going to know somebody. At a restaurant, at a ball game, at a church event. He's going to have gone to school with them at some point, whether it's high school, middle school, college. He's going to know somebody there from something he's done in the past. So never meets a stranger. And if he doesn't know them, he's going to quickly get to know them and call them by the first name, and we'll know them from that point on. So very friendly, very outgoing.
And the reason why I ask you about that is because on any of these occasions when you would see this sort of large personality come out, would he have Cooper with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have people with him most all the time.
Would he ever show Cooper off or brag on him or anything of that nature?
He bragged on Cooper all the time. He bragged on Cooper to everybody. This is my boy, this is my son, this is my little buddy. He always bragged on Cooper.
You knew there were things that were in Ross and Leanna's marriage that were not quite right at the intimacy department. Is that true?
I didn't know that for a long time. I didn't know that until probably 2013.
Okay. And did Leanna share with you that they had intimacy problems?
She didn't share that with me. That was something that I found out later.
Okay. But outside of Leanna?
Yes.
Okay. You aware of any problems in the relationship between Ross and Cooper?
Were there problems in the relationship between Ross and Cooper?
Yeah. Between Ross and this little boy?
No. No.
You don't have anything?
No. Not at all.
Tell us about when the planning for the cruise started.
We talked about wanting to take a family trip. We have a big family. Well, we have 4 kids. Michael and I do. And then we have, Ross and Leanne and Cooper, and then we talked about my sister and her little boy at some point. And we kind of talked about us all going on a cruise together, thinking that might be the cheapest way for all of us to go somewhere, maybe tropical or something of that nature. And in May of 2014, we had gone to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, all of us together to my parents' house in Florida. And that's when we really kind of got the ball rolling on, let's really get this trip going. So that's when we, tried to say, let's get this planned out.
And was Ross involved in those conversations about getting the trip started?
He was. We had talked about it a bit, and he was really instrumental in, hey guys, let's really do this. And so that's when it started.
Okay. And the cruise was to encompass all of y'all, including the kids?
Yes.
And do you have any recollection of emailing him on the 17th of June asking about if he'd done anything about contacting the travel agent?
I don't remember it being exactly that day.
Okay.
I have since seen the transcript of that. But I do remember it being after we got back from that beach trip.
The transcript of the email?
Of the text message. I don't know if it was a text message or an email, but
Okay. Is that something we showed you? Did I show you that? Okay.
yes.
And do you have any recollection of Ross emailing you back indicating, hey, he's checked with the travel agent, he's waiting to hear back?
I know Ross and I talked about he was going to be the one to contact the travel agent because he had someone that he had a relationship with that was a travel agent. I did not have a travel agent that was a contact, so he was going to handle that.
And do you have any idea if he'd actually talked to the travel agent at the time y'all were emailing?
I believe he had mentioned that he was going to contact the travel agent or that he had contacted the travel agent and was going to get prices.
Okay. And did you learn, have you subsequently learned that whenever he did in fact email a travel agent asking about the very cruise that y'all were talking about planning those weeks in June?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Just kind of going back, picking up, I guess, for everybody's sanity as far as we had so much going on here, picking up where we left off. We were talking about, Mr. Kilgore used the term email several times. You never communicated via email with the defendant about this, right? Wasn't it via text?
About what?
About the vacation, I'm sorry.
I think that we did text message. We did text.
Okay. And so when he says email, your memory is it was actually text message?
It was text.
Okay. Just let me ask you a couple of questions real quick. Do you remember back right before your vacation that you guys took on Memorial Day weekend, like a week or two, talking back and forth via text with Leanna?
About what?
About the vacation for Memorial Day?
Do I remember
That y'all were texting back and forth about the details of how the vacation was going to go for Memorial Day weekend and things like that?
I do not.
Okay. Do you remember Leanna texting you and saying that that the defendant wanted this to just be an adults only or adult vacation for Memorial Day?
No, I don't.
Let me show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 931. Your phone number was, I don't need these for close up, 205-394-0098.
It is.
Okay. And I'm just asking you to look at this. Does this look like a text message? You're going to have to hold it real close to your face. Text message conversation back May 14th, May 15th with Leanne.
It is, yes.
Okay. And in that conversation, didn't she say that this was a vacation that Ross wanted to have with just the adults initially, correct?
It looks like it is, yes.
Okay. And then you said, whoa, we got all the kids coming, so it can't be adults only. Okay. So he actually did, at that point, he was trying to get Leanna's mom to watch Cooper so y'all could do an adults only type of vacation.
That's right.
Okay. Looking at State's Exhibit 932, did y'all end up, does that look like a group text between you, Leanna, your husband, and defendant, back and forth about the cruise, starting on, basically from June 9th, 2014?
It does look like that, yes.
And in that, y'all were talking about the cruise, and the defendant was saying, yeah, this is something I want to make happen, or want to happen, right? And he said he wants it to happen bad, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and looking at that now, your husband's not the best at text messaging we've heard, correct?
Not a long texter, no.
So even from looking at that, it looks like he may have a problem responding to group texts and things of that nature, correct?
He's very busy.
Okay. Now, can you tell, I'm going to show, I've got some text messages between you and the defendant from June 17th. Just give me a second and I'll see if I can find this. I think it right on top. Okay. Now I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 607. Looking at State's Exhibit 607, did you on the 17th of June at 10:19 a.m. Text the defendant following up on the cruise? Sorry.
Yes.
You asked him at that point, on that day, you'd spoken to him the day before, but then you asked about the travel agent. Did you talk to the travel agent about the cruise?
Yes.
And then he texted you back at 3:16 p.m., yes, I'm waiting to hear back. Were you aware that that was untrue, that he had never followed up with the travel agent about that up to that point? That he was kind of putting you off? Did you know that?
No.
Okay, did you know that 2 minutes later he did, in fact, finally email the travel agent?
No.
Okay, have you ever seen any emails from the travel agent back and forth between the defendant?
No, I was letting him handle that part of it.
So if the defendant actually received an email back from the travel agent with plans suggesting prices and things for both his family and your family, he never forwarded that on to y'all, did he?
No.
Now, you said at some point you learned about some problems between Leanna and the defendant as far as intimacy or something of that nature. Okay, I think you said initially you didn't learn from Leanna. Just without telling me what they told you, who told you about these problems?
We learned on one of our visits to their home that there was, excuse me, a message exchange, and Ross actually came in and told us that there was a fight between the two of them, and
yeah, this is when, I guess, Leanna had actually blown up on him or something, and she told him he had to come tell y'all about that, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
so we offered to
Yeah.
go home,
Mhm.
and so there was, so that's the first I learned that there were any problems in the marriage.
And was that the extent of what you learned, that he had messaged somebody?
Yes.
Okay, did you know the details of what he messaged or anything like
I
that?
didn't know.
Okay. Did he claim that nothing was going on other than that? Did he
didn't
talk to
claim-
y'all?
He didn't claim anything to me.
Okay. Did Leanna
He
talk to
talked to
him?
his brother separately.
Okay. Did Leanna ever talk to you about it?
I think she was very upset and crying. We ended up staying the night and left the next day. We didn't have any any big heart-to-heart about it. I think we wanted to let them work things out amongst themselves, and we didn't talk much about it.
And when that happened, were you shocked?
I was.
It's nothing the defendant had ever done toward Leanna or anything in their relationship ever led you to believe he would do something like that, correct?
No.
And the last time you saw the defendant with Cooper and Leanna, that was in Memorial Day, or during that weekend, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So did he ever, in May after that in June, you don't know what was going on in their house or in the defendant's life, do you? Other than what he shared with you?
Yes.
Okay. Did he ever tell you that his job situation was going south?
I would object to the characterization. I don't think that's been the evidence.
I think their own witnesses basically said his job was going south and he was having problems.
I'm going to object.
You
to
can
that.
ask.
Okay. Let me rephrase it. Did he ever discuss with you that his job was going poorly? That he was not doing well at work? That he was unhappy?
No, don't feel like I don't feel like it was portrayed that it was going poorly.
Okay.
I think he was just looking at a different opportunity.
Okay, so if it was, that was something you didn't know about him, correct? That he had this going on in his life? That he was unhappy with his job?
He told us that he was going for a different, interviewing for another job, and told us that he didn't get the job, but that's all we knew.
Okay. You didn't know how that had affected him or if it had made him sad or anything like that?
No.
Did he ever share with you anything that he was, his breaking point was pretty low toward the end of May? He never shared anything like that with you, correct?
No.
And as far as you knew, you just knew that he had messaged some girl. Did you ever come to find out that he had expressed that he was in love with a younger girl, 18-year-old, 19-year-old?
I don't think that's something he would share with his sister-in-law.
Exactly. And that would have shocked you, correct?
Yes.
Right. You would agree that if he was doing that, if he was seeing prostitutes while Leanna was asking him to come home and be with the kids, if he was messaging underage girls and things like that, that he pretty much had everybody fooled about who he really was.
Can you repeat that? I don't.
It's okay. Now, you said that you like to ask questions and things like that. I like to play Trivial Pursuit. He was good at it. He was a smart guy, right?
He was.
He remembered a lot of things, correct? He had a lot of knowledge in his
He
head.
did. He does.
And as far as, I know you talked a little bit about his personality in restaurants and things like that, and how he would react and talking to other people and things like that. Did you ever see him in a stressful, traumatic situation where there had been like somebody injured
No.
or a loved one of his hurt or anything like that?
No.
Okay. I think that's all I have, Judge.
So the weekend at Fort Walton at your folks' house, a couple of weeks before Cooper died, did Ross appear to you like he was about to, he was at some sort of breaking point, like he was about to fall apart emotionally?
No, he seemed very relaxed. Happy to be with family.
And all this stuff we've talked about, is it still your opinion that Ross loved his son?
Very much.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that limited basis. He said he seemed happy, not depressed, and seemed to be happy to be with his family down there, correct?
Yes.
Did you know at the same time those pictures he was taking of the family he was sending to an underage girl?
No.
That's all I have to.
I don't have anything further.
Let's take our afternoon break. There's no pads, open eyes, you know, the best stuff. Y'all have a good break.
Let's all rise for the jury, please. Watch your step going down.
Let's take our recess.